That's intimidating. Okay. So ensuring that the project objectives and goals are achieved. That's an important part of sustainability. Adding to that, we need to make sure that we are able to maintain the project in some fashion, after the current funding stream expires. That doesn't mean necessarily that the project is going to keep rolling along in its current form. We may need to and want to adapt the project so that it meets new and emerging issues in the community as time passes. And finally, what we want to think about in terms of sustainability is taking a project with a limited time frame and making it into an ongoing program. Projects generally, when we think of projects, we think of a limited time frame, start time, stop time, project's done. We want to be able to transform our projects into programs. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on in this session today. How to do that, how to build sustainability that makes sure that we are able to, or at least gives us the best possible chance of transforming projects into programs. So here's some definitions that we're going to use in exploring that issue. Critical issues. Critical issues are sort of partnerships, resources, activity staff, other factors that are essential, really critical to our program's operation, our project, and as it evolves into a program, its operation. The things that we usually think of as they're so important that we have to have contingency plans developed for them. And one of the things we want to think about as we're developing our project design, that become a program design, is what are those contingency plans? What are the critical issues? What are the contingency plans that we're going to have in place to address those issues? Things like if our staffing pattern falls through, if we lose a critical, very important partner in our operation, if some of the leveraged resources that we had planned on, resources that are going to help us move our project forward, if that falls through, if we have a change in the elected officials in our community and a change in policy as a result, how are we going to deal with those critical issues? So some thought about those critical issues and some thought about how to build a set of plan Bs into your project design is a really important part of preparing for sustainability. Any questions so far? Okay. So partnerships. Agreements between two or more parties that will support the development and implementation of a proposed project. Partners are just a critical component of sustainability. One of the things that we're looking for is long-term partnerships. Long-term partnerships between organizations that have some mutual benefit from the relationship. And because of that mutual benefit, we'll continue the relationship. Beyond any specific funding period. Building those partnerships is a really important piece of the puzzle for sustainability. And it's not the easiest of all things to do sometimes. One of the things that the Administration for Native Americans has found in its program evaluations, its long-term impact assessments of programs, is that those programs that have been put together in Native communities that are built around a series of effective partnerships have a much better chance of meeting their objectives and remaining in place in terms of the results that they provide after the end of A&A funding. Leveraged resources are non-budget resources. They're not part of your application budget, but they are resources that are attracted to the project, that enhance, improve, and continue the project. They are resources in addition to the budgeted dollars that you're receiving from your funder and the whatever match local match you might be providing as part of the budget itself. Leveraged resources are so important that a lot of funders now have leveraged resources as a scoring criteria in competitive applications. Building partnerships and accessing leveraged resources are long-term activities. They're not something that we are able to do in most cases in a short period of time. If we wait until an RFP or a notice of fund availability or a funding opportunity announcement, whatever the funder calls that thing, where they say, here's the money and here's the program, and here are the scoring criteria for the application. If we wait until that's published to start trying to build partnerships and identify leveraged resources, we're probably not going to be able to do as well as if we take a longer-term perspective, type of approach for building, maintaining partnerships and accessing leveraged resources. Partners are often one of our major sources of leveraged resources. They can be federal or non-federal, cash or in kind. A rule of thumb that we use, we being TA providers, is that 80% of the time that we spend, 80% of the time that we recommend that other people spend in developing a project and an application for its funding, 80% of that time is in the planning of that project. Planning of the project, and 20% of the time is actually spent writing the application. Much more time spent in preparing the scene, in getting our ducks in a row, and getting our partners in place, in working with the community to really have a well-defined set of community priorities and problem statements that we can share with funders. That's where the time is spent in project development, project design, and in application development. Any questions so far?
I think, I would like to just take a minute and open it up. I want to remind everyone that please ask questions. As we're going through, this is your conference, your time. So, absolutely. Did anyone have any questions?
Okay. So one of the places that we really have the opportunity to do some work to build a sustainable project is within our own communities. To the extent that our communities support the work we're doing, are aware of the issues that we're addressing, and to that extent, that helps us. That helps us bring in resources from all sorts of places, not just federal and removed funder resources, but resources from the community itself. And remember, the community is not just a geographic area. Community can be defined in a variety of ways. And one of the things that's I think is really kind of important for us all to do is to take a look at the different parts of our community, make sure that we're involving all of those parts of our community to the extent that's practical and appropriate in sharing the work that we do, building an appreciation for the work that we do, understanding the problems that people are facing that our work focuses on.
And you know, this is Cinnamon. I just wanted to make a comment, Dan, that these programs are a year old. So I think this is an important piece, and some of them may be relying on other programs that they are attached to. So
say again, Cinnamon. And so I'm not quite following.
Just that for sustaining their own programs, all these programs, all the DVPI programs are only a year old. So they're still very new. However, they've, some of them have grown out of other programs as well. So
yeah, good, okay. And I don't know to what extent you've had the opportunity to sort of think about building sustainability into the way you're doing business when you put together your current programs. But it's not too late to start. I mean, if it wasn't something that you thought about at the beginning of the program design process, start thinking about it now. One of the things that's really a bad place to be, for me at any rate, one of the places that's a really bad place to be is coming down, with half a year left in a funding cycle and no clear picture in my mind, no clear picture in the minds of my colleagues, and no clear support from my community about in the area of sustainability. Where do we go from here? Are we still going to have to try and throw together another application to a federal funder to keep ourselves going?
Hi, I'm sorry, I had a question.
Good.
So what you're saying about community and leverage resources, to me it sounds possibly like there could be an opportunity for building social capital here. How do you see that playing into sustainability and where you're going with these resources?
Social capital, for folks that haven't used that term an awful lot, usually refers to the kinds of bonds that we have within our communities, the idea of trust, the idea of mutuality, the idea of being able to sort of feel as though we're being looked after, we're being cared for in some respect and fashion, and that we're actually doing the same thing for other folks, that we're providing some of our time and energy, some of our personal capital to make our community a safe and decent place for people to live. Is that your understanding of social capital?
Yeah, and I think that I just wanted to know, do you feel that social capital could enhance the sustainability of the community, and do you have any examples of leverage resources that maybe you could think of that would enable that process to occur?
I think that there are a number of things that can be done to build on the social capital concept as a sustainability strategy. And we're going to have a section a little later in this webinar on community dynamics. And if I could just take your question and plug it in that part of the presentation, would that be okay?
That'd be perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, so risks and assumptions. We talked about critical issues earlier. What are our plan Bs for dealing with issues that are so important that we really do need to have a contingency in place, a contingency plan in place to help us through any fallback in our plan A. And that's what this first exercise is about. We're here, what I'm going to do is ask you to take about 10 minutes or so and go through this exercise. You've developed a healthcare response to domestic violence with a goal to enhance victim safety. Your grant state shall increase. Here are two pieces here: access to advocacy and transportation costs for 5 women a month so that they can get into a shelter situation. Okay? By the time that you get your grant started, your funding is in place, the program that you're depending on to some extent for assistance in moving those two pieces of your project forward has experienced a major reduction in funds. So what is the contingency that you want to have in place for that kind of dilemma? And then take a look at using your own project. And probably you've got these Plan Bs in place already, but what are the critical issues? What are 3 critical issues associated with your project and contingency plans that you have in place or would have in place or could develop? What would those plans be for dealing with those critical issues if something falls through? Let's take 10 minutes and do that. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Well, I'm wondering, Dan, we have about 20 people on the phone and 18 on the web.
Oh, wow.
So I'm wondering if we should just maybe have an open discussion on that.
That sounds like a better strategy. I didn't know we had that level of participation. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so maybe some of these programs have already thought of those things or have put those plans in place, and if so, or if they have an idea, we just ask that you share with the rest of them.
Yeah, cut question 1 out of the equation, and could you share with our community today, at least, one critical issue that you've experienced and the contingency plan that you had in place or that you implemented or developed to deal with that critical issue?
This is Michael Horton from Copper River Native Association, and that scenario is actually what we experience. We do have a domestic violence shelter that's 120 some miles away from us, but oftentimes we can't get to that because we have to cross the pass, and that gets snowed in and has avalanches. So we oftentimes have to drive to Anchorage, which is about 210 miles away or so. And so we've been kind of struggling with this because we don't really have transportation.
Michael, what kinds of options have you looked at as an alternative to going all the way from Copper River to Anchorage?
Well, we had a working plan with a local businessman who owns a hotel here. He allowed us to use part of the area for emergency cases, part of his hotel, but then it burned down.
Okay. No other possible lodging scenarios?
No, we have no services for seniors. We have no residential services. We do have a jail, and we've had to use that in the past.
Mm-hmm. Safe houses?
No safe houses.
Mm-hmm. So, in working in what do some of the other participants think about that situation, and what kinds of issue clarification, what kinds of contingencies and clarifications of the situation do you think could be done, move forward on? It's not necessarily just a transportation issue, although transportation is a big part of the dilemma. When the passes are closed, they're closed. Are there other ways of looking at how to address that problem? Even things like the development of a emergency shelter transitional housing program as part of the operation in a more isolated community.
Well, and I just wanted to make a comment. This is Cinnamon again with Red Wind. And I know that some areas have community members that have opened their homes for safe housing. And that's not always ideal. It may not always be safe, but depending on the situation and that community support, I think it's very doable.
Well, I can tell you that we've requested that from the community, but so far no one has come forward. We've talked with the churches, and they haven't felt comfortable with it. So, and we also live in a community that has no government. We don't have city government. We don't have a borough or a county. So we've been kind of stuck.
Sure.
This is Melissa from Sioux Falls. Recently, I was at a conference and we spent a lot of time talking about safety planning, especially in those really rural parts of our communities, and maybe really taking a look at that and trying to come up with a creative way of keeping these victims safe. I mean, examples were like putting treatment or recovery plans so small that they could be kept in a shoe, you know, between the liner and the shoe. Having a string in the mailbox to indicate to the postman that there was trouble at home and they needed to get out, and then the postman would go talk to the sheriff. Really thinking creatively outside of the box with these individuals, so if there's not a shelter they can go to, and if they don't have access to a phone, what are other ways that they can communicate, and pulling in different community members that can help them get to a safe place, even down to code words, hanging up a certain color curtain in the window or a towel if they didn't have curtains. I mean, they were really coming up with some creative strategies to help these individuals. And so maybe that's the thought, is to get some specific safety planning training in for those areas.
Those are some great suggestions. And I'm also thinking, too, that because you may be able to get them out of the situation that they're in, and keeping them safe afterwards may be challenging as well. And I think that's where the community, really we need to rely on community members holding the perpetrators accountable, or, you know, whether it's an elders advisory committee or anyone, I guess anyone or any groups that are in any position of authority, ensuring, you know, that victim stays safe. And by doing that, you know, that's by holding that perpetrator accountable. or just letting them know that, okay, we're watching you now. I don't know the solve all solution for that, but that's an idea, is really, and that's where community education is. Once you get that community on board, it can be very, very helpful.
And it might help with the church issue as well, if the congregations get more aware of the extent of the problem and more involved in sort of taking a look at what they could be doing to help reduce that problem. Cinnamon, does anybody have their hands raised?
Elizabeth or Elaine? I'm sorry, Elaine? Did you have a question? How about Sky?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
I had sent my comments in over the chat line. My first thought was maybe to seek out, which was already mentioned, potential safe shelters in the homes of community members. And then my other thought was maybe to have an alternating on-call hours with the current staff, and maybe use the office site and set up a room in that as a shelter space. And I didn't know if maybe there were tribal police available to help with oversight or anything like that. I was just kind of throwing out some thoughts.
Good, thank you. And Michael, we'll move on in just a sec. I just want to ask one more question. You're not Copper River Native Association, am I right in thinking that you're not that organization?
No, we are.
Okay, then you have access to things like Administration for Native American funding, and could put together an application to them to develop, some sort of community strategies for dealing with that issue. And that plan could also, be if as part of the project design piece, folks in the community thought, it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to have some sort of emergency shelter operation here. One of the things that you could get from ANA is funding for the site plans and design work of that, of an emergency shelter or a multi-purpose shelter, multi-purpose facility. So, you've got some options in that arena to work with if you wanted to start doing some community building and community-based planning along those lines. Okay. So, primary partners, a big piece of the puzzle in terms of sustainability is our ability to develop and maintain effective partnerships.
Dan?
Yes.
I want to back up just for a minute. We have a couple questions about, did you comment on that funding source?
Which the ANA? The Administration for Native Americans is in the Department of Health and Human Services. It provides funding to tribal organizations and Native nonprofits. So it's not just like BIA or IHS that works mainly with tribal constituencies. ANA funds urban programs, Native nonprofit programs, and focuses on three areas in its main funding source, and that's the Social and Economic Development Strategies funding source. Social development projects and economic development projects are a big piece of ANA's focus. They also provide funding for governance projects if people are interested in building their tribal court system if people are interested in doing some land use planning, if people are interested in putting together some code work, codification work, DB issues for sure could be part of that governance piece if the applicant were a village council in the case of Alaska or a tribal organization, tribal council. The other parts of ANA's funding have to do with language and cultural preservation and environmental regulatory enhancement work. So that's the gamut of stuff with ANA. There is one, I'm sorry, there's a special competition this year too for organizations that are interested in doing asset building, helping people develop individual development accounts, IDAs. It's a partnership program with the Office of Community Services. And that program is a really kind of cool program. You help folks set up an IDA account. For every dollar they put into that account, they can get up to $8 in matching funds, and they can use that money for a variety of purposes, things like home purchase, micro-business development, post-secondary education. And that competition currently is open. The submittal deadline for that competition is July the 8th. The other competitive areas are closed for this year. They will probably there'll be another round of funding opportunities in those other areas. The announcements will probably come out December or January, and the funding deadlines are usually March, April. Does that help people with ANA? There are some other funders that you probably would want to take a look at if you haven't. One of them is the Indian Community Development Block Grant Fund. Do people have a working knowledge of that one? ICDBG? It can be used for facility building, facility development. It can be used for helping people do micro-business development. It can be used for home ownership assistance. It can be used for public services. 15% of an organization's ICDBG budget can be used for essential services. So you could plug DV services into an application that has to do with anything, actually. The services in that 15% of the budget don't have to relate to the nuts and bolts, the construction stuff that is the other 85% of the budget. So that's another funder to take a look at. There are a number of federal funding sources that we can use to our advantage and use as seed money to start building those programs. You know, we use them for project development. We work within our community and with other partner resources, leveraged resources to transform those projects using that grant money, transform those projects into ongoing programs. Does that help, Cinnamon?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so talking a little bit about community partnerships and sustainability. Like I said earlier, one of the things that has been a really critical piece of effective project design, according to funders that we work with as TA providers, a real critical piece is the extent to which strong partnerships are built into those project designs. People that find themselves sort of having to wing it on their own generally have a kind of tough time. One of the things we want to do, one of the things we really want to do in our work is to build partnerships and leveraged resources. Reasons for creating partnerships include mobilizing and leveraging resources, providing a mechanism for sustainability, and access services that are not available internally through your organization. When we build partnerships, the sales pitch we're going to use is, we're not going to ask somebody to do something new and different and allocate part of their limited resources to a new initiative. We're going to ask them to do something that they're already doing and focus it on target their activities so that part of what they're already doing is focused on the population that we're serving, So if one of your partners, for instance, is a food bank operation, we're going to ask that food bank operation to closely coordinate with us so that we're making sure that we have nutritional assistance for folks that we're moving into emergency shelter situations or congregate meal site situations where that kind of assistance is needed. We're not going to ask them to do anything different, anything extraordinary. We're just going to ask them to help us help the folks that we should be helping together. What they get out of that, of course, is that they are able to, we make their life a little easier because we're helping them identify the populations that really need the kind of assistance that they are providing. Really need that kind of assistance. And show how they can then show how they're leveraging resources when they go to do some work with funders or with their constituents that they're looking for assistance from. Building those partnerships to access services helps with the immediate operation of the project and helps with project sustainability. Or if you have any questions.
Dan?
Yes.
I just want to ask you if I'm losing a little bit of you.
You're losing me.
It sounds like you're getting further away. If you could...
closer to the phone.
Yeah, just a little closer.
That is hard to hear.
Okay.
There, finally, yeah, I can hear now.
Okay.
And then I wanted to remind folks also, if you want to mute your lines, you can do so by *6, and you can also unmute them by *7.
Oh, thanks, Cinnamon. So we were talking about partnerships as being long-term investments, and this is part of the social capital story. Social capital exists between individuals, the kind of bonds that we have, the trust, the reciprocity. I give to you and I get from you, and we can trust each other to honor our agreements. And those individual bonds extend into organizational partnership bonds. Everything really kind of boils down to relationships. When push comes to shove, that's what we really have to fall back on. And in our communities, that's a particularly important piece of project sustainability, development, and design. Here's some of the questions that you're going to, and Cinnamon, I think I'm right in thinking folks are going to have a copy of this PowerPoint that they can keep, right?
Yes, they will all be sent a PowerPoint of this presentation along with a recording.
Okay.
So yes, it'll be available for all DVPI programs.
Cool. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time sort of working our way through these questions, but they're the kinds of questions that you and your partners want to ask yourselves about your relationships and how you're going to make them into strong, enduring, ongoing relationships. How can those collaborations be built, and how can they be maintained? And this is really a place to have a good sit-down discussion, and it doesn't have to be in any kind of formalized environment. It's a matter of spending some time doing some outreach. We all are pretty familiar with doing outreach and building building trust, building rapport, building collaborative efforts. That's really a big piece of what we can use for a sustainability building block. Any questions about any of these slides at this point?
I'm sorry, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
I should probably identify myself. I just got hired on with Muskie. So my name's Morgan.
Hi, Morgan.
My question is, I don't know if I missed the first 10 minutes, so I don't know if you explained it, but could you maybe explain the difference between a collaboration and a partnership so that it's just a little bit more clear to me what the difference would be in this scenario?
Yeah, in some ways, they're synonyms, but what we're really talking about in terms of a partnership, usually a partnership has some sort of framework, more formal framework associated with it, like a memorandum of understanding that sort of lays things out in a pretty clear, logical way. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the goal that we've agreed upon. Here's how we're going to move forward. Here's what I'm contributing. Here's what you're contributing. Here's what we're going to get out of it together. And here's how long the partnership is sort of in place for. A collaboration can be a little more informal, and a lot of times collaborations lead to partnerships. There have been a lot of program operations that I think we've been engaged in where we start out building some sort of trust bond with someone from another organization, and partnerships and collaborations can be internal as well as external. So, in most of our cases, our organizations are so small that we're talking about external partnerships. But in some cases, with larger organizations, folks are running around in silo situations, where I'm doing my job and the other person's doing their job, and we forget that we're probably doing some work that has to do with the same folks, and we don't do the kind of interacting and sharing of resources that cooperation between ourselves would result in, and that's collaboration. It doesn't necessarily mean there's an MOU or an MOA, a memorandum of agreement in place. It just means that we've got some sort of communication channels opened and some agreements between ourselves on how we're going to do some joint planning, some joint service delivery, and some joint program evaluation. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. And one of the things that really is important for us to do with partnerships and collaborations, linkages and collaborations, however we want to describe them, is to make sure that they are mutually evaluated, that there's some good, clear, collegial discussion about how things are working. And that evaluation doesn't happen just at the end of the MOA or the MOU or, after, time has sort of slipped by, that we keep some sort of ongoing conversation in place, that we have clear communication channels, and that those channels are ways that we both coordinate services and share resources and maintain good personal professional relationships. That we don't find ourselves isolated in the community. We don't find ourselves isolated in the community because we've done that outreach. We continue to do that outreach. We continue to have those conversations. So, the kinds of things that I heard someone suggest in response to Michael's critical issue, the string in the mailbox, or the the colored curtain or towel in the window. Those are really good pieces of community conversation. Those are good pieces for building community conversations and raising community awareness. But they also could help start building some collaborations. If folks in the churches in that community were more aware of the extent to which DV problems exist in the community, I think the chances might be a little bit better that they'd be less concerned, or less worried, or I don't know what the word was Michael used, but it was sort of like, there's some risk factors here that they didn't know if they wanted to get involved in. And they might be able to figure out, well, some other communities might have this dilemma too. Why? And we've got congregations in those communities, and wonder if they're doing something, and if so, what kind of system do they have in place, and could we transport that system here and implement it? A lot of communities in my part of the country have a hospitality network where churches are taking in homeless people on a rotating basis. The Lutherans will take them in for a week, and then the Catholics take them in for the next week, and then the Presbyterians for the next. It's a sort of a revolving shelter system, and it helps take care of, it helps the community address, the overflow situation that is really a dilemma when the weather gets cold particularly. So, systems are in place, and if awareness is built, that kind of collaboration can come along with the awareness.
Dan, this is Cinnamon. I just wanted to make a comment with that collaboration. I think it's important that although there's very different programs that are being funded through IHS for the DVPI, but it's important that we maintain that victim-centered approach and make sure that when we have those relationships and those partnerships, the MOUs, that they're meaningful, and keeping in mind, I guess, that each of the programs or systems, I guess, play very different roles in DV and SA assaults. So I just wanted to put that out there for folks to think about, and making sure that law enforcement has their job, and prosecution has their job, and advocates have their jobs, as well as the hospitals and clinics. And just maintaining that victim-centered approach is important with those partnerships.
Thanks, Cinnamon. Okay, so this next exercise, which we're not going to do, deals with asset assessment. In most of our communities, when we do an assessment, we usually call it a needs assessment, but we also have a lot of resources in our communities. The folks that are in our communities, some of the institutions that are in our communities, churches, schools. We've got the opportunity to do some community asset identification and build programs around some of those assets. So that's what this exercise is about. And it might be something that would be kind of interesting for you to do with some of your potential partners, in your communities. What are resources that we need, and where could we find them? Where could we find them within our communities before we even start looking at an external source? What local partnerships could we build? What kind of leveraging could we build from our internal community base And this is another piece of that exercise. Another piece of that exercise. This basically would help you to sort of start developing the components of a memorandum of understanding. Who's the partner? What are the responsibilities of the partner? And what are the benefits to the partner? And use these frameworks to do some asset identification, asset building, and asset commitment at the local level. Any questions about those two exercises? Use them at home. Use them with your sister organizations, your brother and sister organizations at home. Okay, now we're getting into community, and we're going to move into the social capital piece. Before we go there, are there any questions about anything we've covered so far?
The webinar evaluation is up, not the presentation.
Sorry?
The eval is on the screen?
The community...
The evaluation of the webinar?
Oh, I don't know.
So can you go back to?
That's what we can see.
Ask him to go back to the slide.
We lost the PowerPoint.
Oh.
What slide are you seeing at this point?
The evaluation of the webinar.
Huh.
And what they should be seeing is community and sustainability.
Am I the only one seeing this?
Okay, we'll work on that.
Okay. So,
oh, you know what? You might want to try refreshing your browser.
Hello, this is Carrie Imus from Arizona, Wallapai.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi.
Are you just joining?
Did it start yet or not?
Yeah, we're headed down the home stretch. We've
been
for about an hour.
Oh my gosh.
We have about 25 minutes left.
Oh no, I forgot about the time difference.
That's okay. You're welcome to join us.
Yeah, we're just getting to the good part.
Okay.
So
We did refresh, but we're still seeing the web training post-sustainability evaluation form, and we missed the last couple of slides that the presenter talked about.
Should we log out and log in?
Should we log out and log back in, or can somebody?
Yes, try to log out. Go ahead and log out and log back in.
Okay, I'll hang on for a minute or two.
I logged in, but it didn't do anything, so I'll try again.
We have some participants still seeing the slide and the other PowerPoint, so I'm wondering if some of you may have lost web connection or...
Well, how would they be seeing the evaluation if they lost complete connection?
Because it'll freeze it.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh.
So either hitting refresh or trying to log out and log back in. And again, I just want to remind folks that we'll be sending the PowerPoints to each of you afterwards. And we are also recording this, so you will have the ability to go back if we're not able to get up and moving. So Dan, if you want to go ahead and we'll just continue moving forward.
Okay, well here's what I want you to pretend you're seeing. Now, It's a slide that talks about community and sustainability, and actually there are a couple of pieces that we really want to emphasize when we're talking about community. One of them is the thing we were talking about earlier, that we've got lots of different communities, subsets of our community in our overall community, and it's important for us to be in contact as much as we can with all of those subsets, because they can all contribute something to our efforts, and we can contribute something to theirs in a lot of cases. Okay, so community efforts. To what extent are there efforts, programs, and policies in the general community that address the problems that are impacting our community of interest,
Dan, I want to step in one more time. This is Cinnamon, and I apologize. For those of you where you have lost your slides or it's frozen, when you log back in, don't click on the link, but just go to www.readytalk.com. And then you'll go ahead and use the same passcode 2669129. Thank you. I just wanted to jump in.
You bet. Okay, community efforts. And then we want to build community knowledge about those efforts. To what extent does the general community know about what we're doing to resolve problems, what the problems are, what we're doing to resolve those problems, what their effectiveness is, our effectiveness is, and how can we make sure that anybody in our community who needs the kind of help that we're providing, who needs the kind of support that we're providing, can access that support, can access that help. Community knowledge of our efforts. Leadership. To what extent are our leaders, and not just the official leadership, not just tribal council, but the folks that are sort of social leaders, community leaders, what extent do they support what we're doing? To what extent do they understand what we're doing? What extent do they understand what we're doing? That's how we're going to start building the base in the community. We're going to really move our way through building answers to these questions, making sure that we've got all of these bases covered. We want to know what kind of attitude, what kind of perspective does the community have toward our issues, the things that we're focused on, the problems that we are addressing, the problems that sort of are a major part of what we think are some substantial and serious problems in our community. Sometimes folks are disinterested. Sometimes they shrug their shoulders and say, there's not much I can do about that. Sometimes we can help folks understand how to build some community connections, some community context for moving ourselves forward, using assets in our community, adding to those assets from some external sources, building partnerships in our community, accessing leveraged resources in our community, so that the community finally understands that they can have and take some responsibility, and that they can actually, they're empowered to do something. They're empowered to do something to make a difference for the folks that we're working with, that we're concerned about. And this last one is really pretty important. It's something that I am so impressed with some of the folks that are part of the presenters for the series that you're sitting in on. helping build community knowledge about the issue. Helping build community knowledge about the issue. Redwind does a marvelous job in that area. And there are a number of other entities that have that kind of ability to communicate, ability to build knowledge and some consensus coming out of that knowledge about problem consequences, how those problems impact the really vulnerable, at-risk part of our community, and how we can pull together to make a difference. How we can pull together to make a difference. So I want to share with you a little bit about stages of community readiness. And this is actually not part of the PowerPoint presentation, but it's a series of sort of 9 stages of community readiness. And I'll give you a web address to go to get more information about this. Okay, stages of community readiness. The first stage, sort of at the starting point, is no awareness. No awareness. Community and leaders of the community, they don't generally recognize that domestic violence, sexual assault, that those are issues or a problem in our community. It's just the way things are. Community climate like that can actually encourage the behavior that perpetrators are involved in. And so that's the sort of rock bottom of the readiness stages. No awareness at all. And a little bit above that is the idea of denial. Okay, there's little or no recognition that DV and SA is a local problem. But usually there's some idea that problem is someplace. It may not be in our community, or there may not be much we can do about it here. But yeah, it's a problem someplace. We can't do anything about it. And the community is kind of passive about it or guarded in their response. The denial stage. So no awareness, then denial. Then the third stage is labeled vague awareness. Okay, there's some general feeling among some members of the community that we've got a local problem here and that something really does need to be done about it, but we don't have any immediate ideas within the community about what that something is. And there's some stories and there's some anecdotes and some of that, some of that sort of rolls around in the community, but no motivation, no real concerted ideas about how to move forward. That's the third level, vague awareness. Fourth level is pre-planning. And at that level, you're starting to get some kind of recognition, some kind of clear recognition, at least on the part of some folks, that we've got a local problem, that something really needs to be done about it, that there are some leaders in the community, that are trying to do something about it, and that there's some support. There's some support that maybe we can give. We can maybe provide some starting places, the local leaders that you are, some starting places to build that kind of awareness. That's where we want to go. We want to start with that pre-planning piece. We want to move people out of no awareness, denial, or vague awareness into a pre-planning posture. And maybe that's where we are in some of our communities. Some of you probably are past that. The fifth stage is labeled preparation. So we've got planning going on, and there's focuses. People are focusing on practical details, and we've got some pretty good information on the scope of the problem. It's not just anecdotal stuff anymore. We're really starting to understand what those curtains mean, and how many of those curtains or towels in the window, are around our community. And we're starting to understand the impact that's having on people, the people that are hanging up those towels. Okay? We're starting to get active and energetic in this piece of the stages active and kind of energetic about making decisions about who is going to do what needs to be done, where we have some resources, where we have some local resources that we can put, the churches up there in Copper River that can be part of a solution, The community sort of is offering at least a modest support of our efforts at that point. The sixth stage is initiation, okay? Now we've got a lot of information available in enough places. Awareness is built to the point where, we're getting some community climate there's no active resistance to moving forward anymore. No more of this, oh, well, that's just the way it is. It's somebody else's problem, or blaming the victim kinds of stuff. That's going away. That's going away or gone. And the community is really starting to mobilize. The stages that we've talked about so far, focus on community conditions. And as the community starts to stabilize, solidify, as its perspective starts to sharpen, that community is going to help our organization with its own stabilization, okay? We're going to be able to pick up some resources, leveraged resources, some community-based assets, some partnerships that will reduce our dependency on just a couple of funding streams or a funding stream from the feds or from wherever, from the foundation. So our stabilization, our organizational stabilization is going to be the next step in community readiness.
Dan?
Yes.
This is Cinnamon. I just want to make sure that you're aware we have about 10 minutes left of this training.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and I'm right to the last step. And actually, what we've got on this PowerPoint are some additional exercises that folks can do back home. If they see any value in them for themselves. Okay? So stabilization, then confirmation and expansion. That's where we start building partnerships that expand our reach. We're going to get information and support from other places, the schools, the churches, from other components in the Boys and Girls Clubs. We're going to find out we're getting information and resources channeled in from those entities. Information on problem, resources to assist with the problem. And the final stage is professionalization. And that's where we can add a few more staff. We are stabilized enough so that we can, stop trying to run a fairly sophisticated, very energy-consuming program with 1.5 people at that. Okay? Here's the website to go to get more information about that scale, stages of community readiness. www.triethniccenter, all one word, TRIETHNICCENTER Colorado State, COLState.edu/community readiness. Okay? Go to that website. There's a lot of good information about community building strategies, about social capital building strategies, about how to engage the community in a really meaningful, powerful way to bring them into partnership with you. and to make you a good partner with them.
Is that it?
Dan,
Yes.
could you repeat that website
Sure.
one more time?
www.triethniccenter, TriethnicCenter COLOSTATE.edu/, and then one word run together, community readiness. Everybody got it?
I'm going to post it on the chat. Hopefully I've got it.
So one of the things that I really like as a way of measuring where we are and where we want to go, a tool for doing assessment, a tool for doing evaluation and for assessment, for goal setting, for evaluation and monitoring, are scales. I really like scales. And here's a sustainability scale. And basically all this little this little tool does is provide you with some elements of major importance in the area of sustainability. Asset sharing, policies and procedures, advocacy, training and technical assistance, community focus, information sharing, responsiveness. And then some descriptors under each of those scale dimensions that describes what conditions are in place. What conditions are in place? From sort of thriving at the top to sort of in crisis at the bottom. I'd encourage you to use a scale like this, to do some assessment of where you are now. Build your own descriptors. Build your own descriptors on that 5-point scale system, 5 thresholds. Build your own descriptors. Identify where you are now. Identify where you want to be. And build some strategies for getting there. And don't do that in isolation. Do that with brother and sister organizations. Okay. And then wrap up. Project sustainability is a component of project design. It's got to be a project. It's not something that we can wait until the last couple of months of our project to start thinking about. Program sustainability is when we morph our project into an ongoing process. An ongoing process. We're no longer a project with a start-stop time. We're a program. We're an ongoing program that addresses critical issues, creates and maintains partnerships, and builds leveraged resources. We are able to share our accomplishments with the community because we've built in measurements into our program, that, and you can use a scale to do that, or you can use other methodologies to do that. We can share with the community what our accomplishments are, and with funders. So that's about all I've got for today. Do you have any questions? Thank you.
I do have a question, but this would probably be for Cinnamon. Is there any way to get credits towards keeping our licensure and other things through these webinars, like certificates?
I don't know, to be honest. I can certainly check into that. Who is speaking?
This is Michael Horton from CRNA.
Okay. Let me check into that, Michael, and I can get back to you on that.
Okay, I sure appreciate it.
Was there any other questions or comments? I just want to remind folks that I'll be sending out a follow-up email with the PowerPoint and the recording as well. And then you can listen to that recording at your leisure. But I want to thank you all for participating.
And I want to thank you all for doing what you're doing. It's a real humbling experience for me to be in conversation with you folks, because I really admire the efforts that you put into doing what you do and the impacts that you have in your communities. Thanks for doing it.
We do have, Morgan, did you have a question or comment? To unmute your lines, I just want to remind you to press *7.
Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So I'm going to sign off then.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Okay, bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Did I come back on?
Yep, this is a conference call for program sustainability.
Thank you. Please stand by.